Welcome, everybody. We are going to be working tonight on going through our Unit 3 materials. Our topics for this evening is Industry 4.0, and I want to switch these modes here. All right. So I get cheat sheets on my other screen, and you guys see the slideshow here. And once again, the reason I put the slideshow go into slideshow mode, I'm not usually a fan of doing that, frankly, is because sometimes the slides are animated or have videos, and those don't pop up in the editing mode as readily. All right, so we're going to talk tonight about these two main topics. And there's some like new verbiage in here, and some of this is really very particular. So like we'll start out with this term called digitalization, and I'm saying it really slowly and carefully because it's a very easy one to trip over, what that is, how it's used, what impact it's had. And then we're going to take a look at how AI is used in a lot of different industries and what problems those industries have, what solutions AI can provide, what solutions may already be in place. And then we'll just have open discussions about some of these topics. And I think, AI has got such a deep reach now and is starting to impact so many industries. They give a listing of industries that are impacted, but it certainly doesn't end there. Absolutely not. All right, let's move forward here. So the first thing is understanding there's these two different terms that we're looking at. So we're going to basically answer these four questions. And so let's just kind of move forward here and do the definitions. Okay, so digitalization, right? You see, I struggle with that word. Digitalization, say it real slow, is the conversion of written and oral communication to electronic messaging that everyone understands, hopefully, right? So I do a little footnote on that one. Just because you're getting a message electronically doesn't mean people understand, that's for sure. And in all fairness, if you're delivering a message electronically, doesn't mean that you will be understood as you intend. So always write, clearly. All right. So it says here, simply put, communication now is in a digital form that can be processed and manipulated by a computer. Yes. In fact, think about your phone, right? How many of us use your phone to really make phone calls now? And everybody's using them more for the texting aspect, right? It's like, oh my God, somebody's actually calling me. I'm not going to answer the phone, that kind of attitude. And I'm totally guilty of it myself. In fact, pretty much the last thing I do on my phone is make phone calls. It's mostly for texting and emailing and, gaming and other apps, right? Now, because, we're moving into this era of switching everything into this format, there's also the comparison to this other term, which is digitization, right? So, and there is differences between these two words. So let's take a look. All right. So to digitalize with the Z is to transform the entire business using digital processes. So for example, if you work for a company, and a lot of companies use this software, by the way, called SAP, which can handle all of the company's financial documents. It could be like payroll, accounting, whatever, and anybody who knows this software, maybe works at a place that uses SAP, will be familiar with the fact that SAP's got all these different, it's a big system and you can plug in all these tools and expand its capability. And one of the advantages, of course, of doing it this way, right, is if everything's in this software and you're running the whole company off the software, then it's really easy to access all the information, right? So lots of advantages to that, right? It's instantly available. Pretty much if you can get online and connected to the system and logged in, you can see all the stuff that you need to see or do all the work that you need to do, right? It's all right there. Digitizing, conversely, means when you are taking something that's in a physical format and turning it into digital. The most classic example is taking the words on a piece of paper and putting them on the computer screen, right? Could be as simple as a PDF or a Word document, but it could also be an email. It could be, moving into a different kind of system. So instead of like sending a physical piece of mail, you would get that junk mail in your email inbox, right? Isn't it interesting though? And if you do a study on this, right? Um, you know, and I think of like the goofy TV show The Office, right? And you guys, I don't know if you guys have ever watched it, either the British version or the American, but in the American version of it, what business are they in? Right? They sell paper, right? So they sell paper, like they sell paper for printers, basically, or copy machines. And this is a really interesting thing that's happened. One would think that if we're in the process of uh, digitalizing and digitizing, that we would have cut down on the amount of paper that we use. Yeah, guess what happened? Just the opposite. Like, I always found this astounding, but like when the internet first started happening, people would go into their web browser and find something online, and what would be the first thing they do? Well, I'm going to print this. So I can show it to my friends. Well, now we share links, but you know what? People still print stuff, and they print stuff a lot. And I don't know about you guys, but I get plenty of paper mail, and there's still sometimes paper documents that we have to sign. Um, okay, so yes, we are converting more and more stuff into digital formats, but it is truly difficult to completely let go of the paper. And if, in fact, if you think of some of your most important documents as a human being, your birth certificate, your passport, right? Those are on paper, right? Are we getting to the point where we're going to have digital versions of those? It's already happening, right? Does anybody use a digital wallet? Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Martin, you do? Um, yeah, I have some things in a digital format, frankly. Um, I'm really careful about what I have in a digital format, but I have had, an example. My wife and I were traveling one year. We went to New York. She had a conference out there. I went along for the ride. Did my teaching remotely, if you can believe it or not, from the hotel room. And then, she'd go to her conference, we'd hang out, catch dinner, catch a show or something. And then we went to get back on the airplane to go back to Milwaukee. And my wife's like, I don't have my ID. Okay, try getting on a plane without an ID, right? She didn't have a passport, didn't have her ID. What had happened is she left her ID at TSA in Milwaukee. Right, she was going through through the line there, and well, airport to airport, they figured out, okay, the ID's sitting there. I happen to have a digital image of it because we were like filling out an insurance form or something, and I had a picture on my phone. And I'm like, here's her ID. And thank God they let us go on the plane, right? Because otherwise we would have been driving back or walking back to Milwaukee or catching a bus or a train. Anyhow, but yeah, so we're not quite there in all capacities, but I have been kind of giving up the paper for a long time in my teaching profession. I haven't accepted schoolwork on paper since the 90s, right? And at first when I did it, people would really freak out to it, by the way. They'd be like, what do you mean I have to turn in a Word document? I'm like, well, how'd you type up your paper? I use Microsoft Word. Well, just email me the Word document. You're good, right? So it is a mindset change, but it is a paper. It's not going away though. All right. So if we're going to do digitalization, where we're converting the entire operation to a digital format, that's a completely different thing, right? So they're going to use examples here, and some of these are pretty poignant ones. So, for example, here we talk about disrupting the industry. So, for example, Uber versus a taxi. All right. So, if any of you have ever ridden a taxi, most of us in this part of the world never get in a taxi. Maybe the only time is um, you're at the airport, right? And you didn't want to pay for parking, so you're taking the taxi home. That'll happen. Or maybe you've had way too much to drink, so the bar calls you a taxi to get you home so you don't die or something, right? Like goofy examples. But if you lived in a city like New York and you wanted a taxi, you would just step out onto the curb, raise your arm up in the air, and 2 seconds later, somebody's pulling over and picking you up, right? And so you don't need technology to do that. All you need is to step out and make yourself apparent to the taxi drivers, and you pick a taxi that's available. But then Uber came up, right? I don't know how many of you have ever used Uber. You know, yeah, a lot of us have, right? I've used it kind of experimentally. I've kind of used it intentionally. Um, One time my car broke down in Kenosha and needed to get back home. We were at Woodman's shopping, groceries, kids in the car. Car wouldn't start, and I had to take an Uber home with all the groceries. That was not an inexpensive Uber, but it did get me home, thankfully, right? And it was a cold winter day. But what Uber brought to the table is it's all app driven. Right? If you've ever used the app, you go on the app, you set up an account, you put in your payment information, and then you bring up the app, you tell it where you're going, and it says, okay, there'll be a ride there in 2 minutes. This is how much it's going to cost. Sometimes it'll give you a list of options, which driver or which rate you want to go with, and it's all on the app. You don't have to pull out cash. You can tip a person or whatever, but it's all digital, and it completely upended the taxi business. So like if you know, prior to Uber being around or Lyft being around, those two services, it really changed that industry a lot, significantly. The other thing is that, improving efficiency as compared to manual work. So example, sorting through millions of transactions easily using software. So data analytics folks, if you think back to what we were just doing with spreadsheets, and even though the examples aren't really, just think of the concatenation example we were doing, where it was like I figured out a formula to make one thing work, and then I just double click the thing and it transposed to like a whole bunch of different entries all automatically, right? When you're working in a digital format, that kind of stuff is possible. If I had to do that manually with pencil and paper or typewriter or computer and printer even, that process would be significantly slower. And so efficiency is gained. Ultimately, we're improving the user experience, and they use the example here of the concept table using interactive artificial or augmented reality at Pizza Hut. Have any of you guys ever experienced that? Anybody? Yeah, I don't think I've seen it. I mean, granted, I never eat a Pizza Hut. Okay, so we'll start there. I have ordered stuff from their website, I think maybe like 10 years ago or something. And I think their website's kind of, good as far as that goes. Pizza Hut holds one really notable distinction, though, in the world of IT. Arguably, they are the first company that did e-commerce online. It's like full e-commerce. So go to the website, pick the pizza you want with the toppings that you want, click deliver, pay for it, and have it show up at your door. Right? So they were actually kind of groundbreaking. But the thing that augmented reality is kind of a weird thing, because what they're talking about is they have these tables that have computer screens built into them, and it's interactive and it's touch screen, and you can kind of order your pizzas and look at them and look at options. I've never experienced that in a restaurant, but I have gone to like Olive Garden. Maybe some of you guys have done that, and you can just order with the waitress. But anybody who's like experienced knows that they have this little like tablet like thing at your table, and you don't even have to call the waitress over, so you have to like be angry. It's like, hey, we've been here for 5 minutes, she hasn't even asked us what drinks we want yet. That kind of scenario. But what Olive Garden has is these little tablets, and you can just start ordering your stuff off the tablet, and it's not exactly augmented reality, but oh my God, like if you're one of those people that's impatient and you want to get your order in, you know what you want. You can just sit down and get your order in, and they just start bringing you food. You don't even have to interact with the waitress, you know, kind of a neat thing. Um, or maybe the other example is like you go to Culver's and you can order from the table. So here's an image of that augmented reality pizza thing. You can see they have like, a touch screen table, and these people are like picking their toppings, to add to the pizza. Kind of weird, but hey, it's how it goes. All right. So some of the benefits, of switching over to completely electronic format is the potential of increasing how many customers you have, right? Whether you're using a mobile app or a website or both, right? Um, you know, you can use new tech a lot faster. So, for example, if you're already fully vested in being digital, it's easy to add new technologies to it. If some of your systems are still paper based and you're trying to, add AI to it, well, AI doesn't work really too well with paper. You got to get it into the digital format first. If you improve your efficiency, it lowers your costs, right? Maybe gives you better control over things. And of course, lower costs also leads to greater profits, right? Or potentially higher, say higher customer satisfaction. Um, some of the other kind of interesting things here, and I want you to think about this, is if you have records that you're digitizing. So, for example, I don't know if any of you guys have ever done this at home, but I know a few people that when they get important documents, like let's say a medical bill or something like that, they take the piece of paper that the medical bill is, they scan it, it becomes a PDF, it's on their computer, and then they throw the paper away. Does anybody do that? Some people do, some people don't. I, for example, when I do my taxes, I used to do my taxes and then I would print them on paper and put them in a folder and put them in my file cabinet. And I don't know, 10 years ago, I'm like, why do I do that? Like, nobody ever asks me for my taxes. It's like, it's not like I'm out buying a house or something, right? And even like the mortgage lender would probably allow me to send them a PDF of my taxes, right? And chances are they can just look it up electronically anyways, right? Um, you know, better accessibility, better information exchange, absolutely. Increasing response time as data is readily searchable. Okay, sure, right? If you can keep it in a digital format and the text in the digital format is searchable, well, now you're really leveraging some power there for sure. Once you put it in a digital format, then you can also take advantage of analytics. So, like if I'm like, let's say, digitizing all of my bills, I then can also maybe analyze all those bills and go, how much did I spend on medical bills last year? How much did I spend on car repairs last bill? How much did I pay in taxes or property taxes or whatever, right? And I can do an analysis and a comparison. And when I have the information readily available electronically, I can do very quick calculations. Like, for example, I know my property taxes went up about 10% last year. That's a lot, really, not as much as some people though. Some people had much more significant increases. Um, Otherwise, how would I know that? I'd have to like dig up my tax bill on paper, pull out the other tax bill on paper, pull out a calculator. You know what I mean? If it's all on screen, it's so much easier to deal with that. All right. So how do we like have a good way to move into this, digitalization area, right? Where the whole business is operating that way. Well, and I think this is true for any business considering doing this, and a lot of businesses have done this. Some of them forcibly by the pandemic, by the way, and I think that's pretty fascinating. Is you have to have a very clear goal and purpose. Like you have to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you're heading that direction. Right? If you're like, oh, I think it'd be kind of cool to have online ordering, that's not very clear purpose. But knowing that that's what you want. So, for example, think about this. When the pandemic kicked in, we were all terrified. None of us wanted to go to eat. None of us wanted to go to the grocery store. None of us wanted to do shopping, any of that stuff. Some of us had to, but a lot of people, if they could avoid it, okay, well, we would sit at home and we would order food from our grocery store if they had the system in place. Now, some grocery stores already had it in place. But what happened to most businesses was like, oh my God, nobody's walking into our restaurant. We better add online ordering. We better get a mobile app. Oh my God. you know, and it was an afterthought. And so now any place that before the pandemic didn't have it has it now, or at least, maybe got wise and is thinking about having it now. But clear goal. It also helps to have the people who are running the place or in charge clear on what those goals are and operate according to those goals. Leadership in any organization steers the ship, right? Like you might walk into, all right, well, I had an experience today. I walked into Walmart and I got in the self checkout lanes because the other lanes are super long, the cart full of stuff, wanted to buy it. and I didn't want to pay with my credit card because I had a bunch of cash in my pocket and I wanted to pay with cash. And then we get up there and they're like, oh, we don't take cash at self checkout. I'm like, what? What kind of self checkout is this? Doesn't take cash. Okay, fine. So we just abandoned the cart, walked away. Now, is that the fault of the store or the person who was like overseeing the self checkout? No, because when I looked at the self checkout machine, I saw that there was a dollar bill thing and a coin thing, but it wouldn't take cash. They just don't have it set up. That's a leadership thing. That's somebody in leadership going, you know what? We don't want to count the money, so just cards on those. That's pretty lame, isn't it? Right. All right. So empowering workers to change, that's a big part of it too, is like getting your employees to buy into the whole process of it, right? Like if you're used to working in one modality to get them to switch to another, right? Um, indicating what all the benefits are to everybody, and then training the employees so they learn how to work in these new systems. So, for example, like if you worked in a warehouse and you were a order picker, and the old way of doing it is like, here's this piece of paper, go pick these products, and you go out there and you pick them, versus it comes up on a tablet, you know, and the tablet tells you where the stuff's located, or maybe you're on a forklift that's robotic and it just takes you right to the aisle, right to the location, so you got to like train your people to work with those systems too. All right. All right, so I'm just going to put this up here, right? So we talked about some of this stuff earlier in the course. And these are some of the discussion questions. And I'm not going to, there's a bunch of these in this slideshow, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Is there anything on this list that somebody wants to talk about? Or is anybody working somewhere where AI or digitalization is coming into what you're doing and altering the way you're doing it? Anybody have any stories to share? Okay, not a very verbose bunch. That's okay, right? A lot of us are hoping to work in industries where that happens. Um, there are places though that are changing, right, as a result of some of these technology. I'll give you one really good example. If we look at one particular sector, all right. And so they're talking about the following industries, and right up at the very top is retail, and that's one thing that I've had a bunch of experience with in a bunch of different capacities. But I often, if I go grocery shopping, and this started during the pandemic, um, once Woodman's was open 24 hours again, my wife and I always made a point of like shopping super late at night at Woodman's because there's nobody there. That's when they're restocking the shelves. It's nice and quiet. The parking's easy, yada, yada, yada. Right. Yeah, there's crates and pallets and stuff in the walkways, whatever. I can deal with that. But one thing I noticed, I was shopping there once, and there's this like robotic shelf inventory robot at Woodman's. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. I know Kenosha has one. I know Oak Creek has one. I think Menominee Falls has one. Maybe Waukesha too. And what it does is it walks. Okay, it goes up and down the aisles. It's got this bright light and cameras. It looks at the shelves. It reads the tags. It says, "Oh, look, we're out. We're really low on Rice Krispies." you know, and it takes inventory and sends it into the system so that a human doesn't have to go around and do the same task, right? So a human might go around, the human might make mistakes, the robot might make mistakes too, right? Because maybe the product it's looking for is hidden behind the cornflakes. The Rice Krispies, somebody hid the Rice Krispies boxes behind the cornflakes and they couldn't even see them, but they were really there. So that's possible. But oh my God, that frees up at least a person, right? Because that robot can operate all on its own. Not only that, it's got like LiDAR and cameras and all these sensors. So like if you walk in front of it, it'll stop or try to go around you. It's really kind of a trip, right? That's one device in one industry. Okay, is that AI? All right, well, let's talk about that, right? Or is it automation? I'm not really sure. I think it's a combination of both, really. The aspect that it's dealing with, let's say you walk in front of it and it tries not to run you over, there's at least the appearance of intelligence there, right? There's the decision it has to make that's like, oh, human, don't run over human, pause, drive around human. Maybe I'll come back to this aisle later and do the inventory in this other aisle because that one's empty, that kind of thing. So, questionable whether it is AI, but it certainly is digitalization for sure, right? Without a doubt. So, all these industries are affected. Um, and basically, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go industry by industry here and look at these three aspects: background on what the industry is about, like their numbers, their metrics, how they operate, what problems they have, and what AI might do for them, right? And this kind of mimics the homework that we had for Unit 2, by the way. So looking at retail, right? So retail is when we take a business that sells directly to the end consumer, customers, like regular people like us. They have examples here: Walmart, Amazon, and Kroger. What stores does Kroger operate in Wisconsin? Does anybody know? You should know this.
Pick and
Is it
Save and
Pick and
Metro
Save?
Pick and
Market.
Save.
Yeah, it's Pick and Save, right? So Pick and Save became a publicly traded corporation a few years back, and immediately Kroger, which I think started in Ohio or Pennsylvania or somewhere out east, right? The nation's largest collection of grocery store chains, by the way, bought them out. So now when you go to Pick and Save, you get Kroger products, but they're really, really big in the grocery industry. They're huge, absolutely huge. So retail has 52 million working Americans. So what's the population of the United States? Roughly. Does anybody know?
I think around 350 million.
Yeah, George, it's a fairly good guess. Maybe a little more, give or take. So that's what, 1/7 of the workforce is working in retail. That's huge, right? Considering there's also retired people and children that don't work, right? So 52 million people work in retail. Wow, that's huge. I used to run retail businesses, right? And I spent a lot of my adult years working in retail, owning retail stores, both with brick and mortar and online. You that's 1/4 of the total employments in the United States. 25% of all people work in retail. 4.6 trillion gross domestic product. All right, so here's some of the problems they have. Retailers have to compete with online stores and with an international market because of online sales. Smart retailers sell in the store and online, but there are plenty of retailers that only sell retail. Great example, taco truck. You know what I mean? Chances are they probably aren't selling online. I don't know about that. Maybe some taco trucks have websites too where you can order in advance. Okay, so that's filtering in there. But there are retail businesses that don't have online presences. Customers expect a seamless experience. Okay, I'm not sure what they exactly mean by that, but I think what they are expecting is like, I want to be able to do the same stuff I do in the store that I do online, or the same stuff I do in the store and do online, or vice versa, right? Maintaining a customer base. So, okay, so I was at Walmart today. I was not very happy with my experience because I ended up having to abandon my cart and not get the stuff I wanted, right? Does that mean I'll never go back? No, because they're cheap and they're close, so I'm going to go again. But sometimes you lose people and you really piss off a customer, they're maybe not going to come back, right? So that's kind of a consideration. Inspiring and retaining employees, that's a problem in retail. Okay, so why is it you go to some stores and the service is so bad? Well, they can't find anybody that wants to work there for that rate of pay to deal with that level of hassle, and this is a conversation my wife and I have all the time. It's like, oh man, I wouldn't want to work this job. Okay, let's just be really nice to these people because they have really sucky jobs, you know? And of course, when you work in retail, you're the one that absorbs everybody's negativity. All right, adjusting to the new normal after COVID-19. All the stores that are out there went through this. Some of them didn't survive it. Some of it, some of them did, and they had to completely revamp how they operate. A lot of the restaurants in the area where I live, if they never did um, online ordering or phone ordering or whatever, they're doing it now. And if they didn't even do carry out orders, they're doing it now. Right. A lot of restaurants in the past just relied on people coming in. A carry out order was like, one order out of 100. Now it's like you walk into some restaurants and most of their businesses carry out. I mean, even Culver's. Kathleen?
I'm sorry, just a really quick question for you. As you cite the problems that the retail industry is facing, is that due to the lack of AI that will be addressed by AI, or is just in general? Just
Well,
curious.
that's exactly where we're moving. So, like the next slide.
I'm sorry.
All right. So here's some examples of some AI being applied to solve some of these problems, right? So like we so the pattern here when we talk about these industries is we talk about what their current status is, what some of the problems that they have are, and how AI might help some of those problems, right? Maybe not necessarily all of them, but a pertinent question for sure. So one example that they show here is this tool called Lobot, which is an autonomous robot, navigates aisles and fetches requested products, proves the ease and efficiency of locating in-store merchandise. Okay, this is kind of weird, right? So if if I'll give you an example. If I order some groceries online through Woodman's and then I go and pick them up, they have the order ready for me to go. The way that Woodman's does it is they have people that work for Woodman's. They get your order. They take a shopping cart in your list. I don't know, excuse me, if it's a tablet or a phone or whatever it comes up on. And they walk the store, grab the items, put them in a cart, take them to the room, put them in bags, and then you show up and pick them up after you pay for them, right? There are organizations, though, that have robotic systems that do the same thing. They might not traverse a retail space, but they might have a warehouse where all the same products are located. And the Lobot is the one that does the order picking. I know from talking with students that work at the Amazon warehouse in Kenosha and up in Oak Creek that they have some of that type of stuff in place. I know they don't call it a Lobot though, right? There's also these Amazon Go stores, and this is a wave of the future, and this has been predicted for quite a while. And the problem that they've been working on is, can you imagine if you could walk into a store, grab the whatever stuff you need, throw it in your shopping cart or maybe your bag or whatever, and you walk out the door. Okay. So how do they charge you? All right. Well, you have an account with them, and it like either your phone or some sort of like RFID chip that's sitting on you lets them know, hey, it's me, right? And I have my payment information is already put into the system, and I don't have to go through a scanner because they have RFID chips on all the products. And as I walk out the door, it's charged automatically to my account. I don't have to interface with a human being, right? So this is okay, a self-checkout store without the self-checkout, right? So a lot of retail stores have put self-checkouts in now, but this is ramping it up to another level. Some vendors, and I'll give you another example. Walmart and Sam's Club do this, and I really like this feature, and I wish Costco would do it because I prefer to shop there. But Sam's Club had this thing where if you go into the store, I put the stuff in my cart, I could scan the stuff with my app. When I'm all done, I don't have to go to the checkouts. I just hit pay, walk out the door, and show them my phone and my receipt. I'm done. Don't have to stand in line for 20 minutes or, you know, whatever. None of that process, right? So that's a thing that's already happening. This vision has been around for a really, really long time, and we're just starting to see it come to fruition. Another thing. Okay, how about chat bots, right? Like you call a place, say, hey, what's the number one call a retail store gets? Are you open? Uh, how late do you close? Do you have milk? You know, that kind of like goofy questions like that. And do you really need a human for that? No, I mean, granted, you could put like, we're open for Monday from 9 to 5 on your voicemail answering message, but you could also maybe have it set up that a chat bot, like if somebody goes to the website or calls or whatever, is automatically set up to respond to a question like that. Um, and this is kind of a weird one, the bottom one, in-store heat mapping reveals which products are picked up, which are returned, and where the customer goes after leaving the shelf. This is really, really creepy. And I'll put it like this. Some retail stores, and I'm just going to clue you in, Target is one of them, has sensors built into their retail displays that if you have their app loaded on your phone and you walk in through the store and you attach to their Wi-Fi, they know who you are, what shelf you're standing in front of, and what products you're picking and all that stuff. They take all this data and they basically use it to, it's like, okay, every time somebody buys a pack of diapers, they're also buying the, diaper rash cream. Let's put the diaper rash cream right next to the diapers, right? And they probably do that anyhow, but they might do it more strategically based upon how you move around the store. And I think this is really kind of interesting and sort of creepy because now they're monitoring your very particular behaviors in how you're shopping. I'm not sure how comfortable I feel with that, but stores that have been doing it already, right? So, kind of an interesting thing, um, and for example, maybe they take a product and they put it, for example, why is it when you go into Walmart, they have all these end caps and they have stuff in the middle of the aisles, right? Well, the answer is because it works. People buy that stuff, right? You put it on an end cap or put it in the middle of the aisle, all of a sudden people are like, yeah, I guess I do need Q-tips. Well, look, they're on sale, right? Otherwise, you would have just walked by it. Um, yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And then you do a comparison. Target doesn't put stuff in the aisles. I think what we should do is let's go ahead um, and take a break. We're going to talk about agriculture when we come back, but I'm going to pause the recording here. We'll do a 5-minute break and we'll be back at, let's call it 8:46 or 8:47. All right, let's look at agriculture now. So with agriculture, it says agriculture is a practice of cultivating plants and livestock. I think we all get that. Some of the products, animal, grains, etc. Some of the really big players, Nutrien, Tyson Foods, and CHS Incorporated. So there are these major corporations that run a lot of our farms and food production. Some people like that, some people don't. And generally speaking, the United States exports food more than we import, right? So, our, Great Plains states, produce a lot of the grain for the world. It's actually a pretty amazing thing. And it says there were 22.2 million agriculture jobs here in America. And so I guess 11% of the total workforce is employed in agriculture related jobs. That includes processing the food and everything like that. And it contributes 1.1 trillion to the GDP. Some of the problems: demand for sufficient, safe food increases while food wastage increases. All right. So, you know what a really good example of this is? Like what's happening with eggs right now, right? They had a big problem with organic egg production. I think a lot of the eggs were had salmonella or something like that. And now it's very hard to find organic eggs if you can get them at all. And then even regular eggs are getting to be like $6, $7, $8 a dozen. The price is crazy. I mean, in many cases, doubling or tripling. There's a big impact on with agriculture. 40% of the Earth's surface is used for agriculture, uses 70% of the water, 11% of the global greenhouse gas is produced by agriculture. Climate change, soil erosion, biodiversity all make it harder to plant. And how do you keep people on the farm when they're all out here learning how to play with AI, right? I mean, that's a big, big issue. Like, who wants to do agriculture voluntarily? Well, there are some people that do want to do it voluntarily. So some of the solutions in agriculture analyze the demand to determine which crops to plant. Like, so for example, are we providing enough avocados? If avocados are really popular, or if people realize, like, for example, eggs are a really good source of protein, do we allocate more resources to that? You know, Monitoring soil health so we can fix things if the soil's not okay, right? Like either fertilizing or leaving a field sit fallow maybe for a while. Automatic feeding crops reduces the workload for the farmers. So, okay, so like if we can fertilize and water and we can have those systems automated, well, that means the farmers don't have to go out and do it. That means they can be more productive doing other things. And AI can identify and monitor nutritional deficiencies, diseases, and water stress to determine the health and yield of the crops. All right, so some of the things that are happening. So they do already have smart irrigation, spraying, and vertical farming to let the farmers use their resources basically more efficiently. We are seeing drones and GIS. That's GIS, by the way, stands for Graphical Information Systems. That's where they have like harvesters and tillers and things like that that work off of GPS systems. So they automatically read satellite information and they just go up and down the farm fields automatically. Right? Nobody in the tractor. It just runs on its own. And then they also use AI to detect weeds by using vision technology, often mounted on drones, by the way, where they can just kind of look and go, aha, look, there's a weed, in our corn plants, right? And by identifying them, they can take care of those issues. Here's an example of vertical farming. So like especially in greenhouse spaces, they do a lot of this, where there's lights, grow lights and everything on multiple levels like that. So they can plant more in less space. Right, skipping little group conversations. Let's take a look at healthcare. Healthcare is one that's really been kind of evolving a lot in this area too. All right, so all right, we know what healthcare does basically. It also includes hospitals, nursing homes, medical device suppliers, etc., insurance companies, and pharmaceuticals. Some of the major players: United Health, Johnson and Johnson, and Aetna. And by the way, Johnson and Johnson's not the same as SC Johnson in Racine, but a lot of people are still familiar with it. More than 900,000 businesses with over 20 million employees are working in this sector. That's pretty huge. Healthcare spending grew to 3.8 trillion in 2019. That's their spending, not their revenue, by the way. What I always get amazed at with the healthcare industry is and we were just at Freighter in Milwaukee County here for an eye doctor appointment for my wife. And our daughter came with, and when we pulled in there, she's like, "Oh my God, they're building more and more buildings." And I'm like, "Yeah, they have, I don't know how many hospitals just in that one site, And I mean, it's literally like a whole city. They have their own power plant and everything for that medical complex. And I hearken back to when I was a youth and they had one hospital building in that whole complex, and the rest of it was empty fields. And now you go there and it's like, oh my God, it's just crazy how much growth there has been in that industry. Some of the problems they face: cost and transparency. Medical services are expensive. Sometimes it's a real hassle to deal with the institutions, everything from insurance to clinics to doctors to hospitals. A lot of people are trying to stay away. So it's a lot of people try to self-heal. So they do the holistic thing, or they go to alternative practitioners. Where you get your care. So a lot of like hospitals have diversified. there is like way too much work for way too few people doing the work in healthcare. This is the same problem we have in IT, generally speaking. I know you hear about IT layoffs, but generally the trend in anything technology or healthcare related is there's way more jobs that require skills than there are people to fill those jobs. That's why a lot of you are here, right? So they have that problem in healthcare. Safety on the job. I mean, the pandemic got a lot of people to quit. They're like, you know what? I'm out. You know what? I'm going to go back to working in the farm, because I don't have to deal with COVID or diseases or, who knows what. Workplace violence. I'm not really, well, I guess you could take a look at what happened with that CEO getting killed, right? Health insurance guy, I guess, right? Stress, burnout, lack of work-life balance. A lot of the people that work in these areas do work way too many hours, right? Sometimes that happens to IT people too, but not in the same way. And you usually don't have somebody's life in your hand. That's the other aspect of healthcare. There are AI things happening. So one thing is like robotic surgery, where they have robots that go in and actually do certain procedures because they can do it much more precisely and accurately than a human can. Let's face it, a human can get nervous or make a mistake or have the shakes or something. A robot does not. They're using AI to detect certain diseases now. So, for example, they are using it to find skin cancer on people. There's also, and there's a video here, and I don't have time to play it, but I would encourage you guys to watch it if you get a chance. You can link on it right off the PowerPoint. They have basically kind of like this app that allows you to monitor your health. And I don't know if anybody does this, but the one example I use sometimes is I have a friend who had a heart problems and ended up getting like a pacemaker and stuff. And they put this little thing inside with the pacemaker that talks to his phone. And then if he ever has an event that happens, the phone calls the doctor or the ambulance or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, amazing, right? Just crazy technology. Some like really kind of weird additional things that are happening is we are getting to the point where we're seeing like synthetic limbs that are AI powered that respond to human thought. Like, oh my gosh, right? That's kind of like science fiction stuff. There's a chat bot called Sensely that acts as an empathy driven conversational platform that's like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that you're not feeling well, because like humans aren't often that polite, right? But maybe the chat bot is a little bit better. Hero 21, which is an autonomous disinfection robot used in hospitals, especially during a pandemic. And I don't know of any hospitals around here that use that system, but I did hear about it when the pandemic was going down. And they would use, strange ways to kind of sanitize everything because everybody was so paranoid. It makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, like if something's really that nasty, you want to send human beings in to do it, even if you're masked and gloved and covered and all that kind of stuff. And then Lucas 3, a chest compression system for CPR. Interesting. All right. Notice how, the healthcare's got a lot of stuff going on. We have some of the images here. So the synthetic arm, and that's the ultraviolet sanitization system for hospital rooms and procedure rooms. All right. They do recommend this app, and I don't know if has anybody ever tried this app, Wysa? Heard of it? No. I will tell you I'm really reluctant, but there's an encouragement here that you can install it on your phone, and then you can kind of skip about a paid plan on it, but it does help you monitor your health. One kind of practical aspect to this is I don't know how many of you have a smartwatch, but a bunch of you do, right? Yeah, but no, I have one too. I don't wear it very often, but one thing that's really cool about it is it not only keeps track of like my steps and I can see my text messages on my wrist, but it also like monitors my blood pressure and my heart rate and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really helpful in that regard because there's been a couple of times where I don't know what it was. I was either stressed out or exerting myself too much. And it gave you like a blood pressure warning. It's like your blood pressure is kind of high right now. It's like, that's because these Walmart people are pissing me off. No, I'm kidding. but but it was like kind of one of those like situations, and I think that's really kind of interesting that you can do that kind of monitoring. There's this really cool um, TV series that was out a number of years ago, and if you guys remind me to show you the link before we leave here tonight, it was a web series created by Warner Brothers called H Plus, which talks about what initially was a health monitoring device. It turned into let's call it an augmented reality device that then eventually got embedded into the human being, so that basically like all your smartphone capabilities and health monitoring capabilities were embedded into your body, and you could connect to the internet on it too and do all the stuff you do on your phone without having to have a device. Really kind of weird. And it sounds like science fiction, but they're already designing stuff like this, folks. All right, in manufacturing, Matt, what is manufacturing? Well, they build things from scratch, right? And America has a long and history manufacturing thing, and a lot of manufacturing renovations happened here in the U.S. first. It can be the creation of literally anything from scratch. You say chemicals, cars, computers, clothes, etc. About 12% of our total output in the United States comes from manufacturing, and about 8.5% of the workforce is employed in this industry. I think in Wisconsin, if we look at that number, I think Wisconsin still has a very strong manufacturing background, especially in the Racine Kenosha areas. So you think about this, think of all the big factories that either were in Racine and Kenosha or still are in Racine and Kenosha, right? And Laura, I see you nodding because you know that firsthand, right? So a lot of people still work in manufacturing here in this area. But we used to have several major car manufacturers in our counties. Most of that's gone now, but that history is still here. And manufacturing is not going away. In fact, a lot of people are seeing it have a resurgence, especially with all the tariffs. Who knows what will happen? Problems that they're having in manufacturing, the same problem that we hear from a lot of our employers in the area: shortage of skilled labor. It's like people that know how to do certain tasks and have the skills. That's a big problem. Trying to figure out how much product they should actually make, right? So they can make like so many cars or widgets or whatever they're making, and how do they know they're going to sell all those, right? They have to have some way of predicting it. Controlling and tracking inventory to avoid overstocking. This is a chronic problem. It's like, do I buy a whole bunch of stuff and get it at a discount and keep it in my warehouse, and then, or do I just buy what I need just before I need it? But then what if I can't get my hands on it? And production lines need to keep running. And one thing that happened during the pandemic is the supply chains were shutting down. So some places weren't working, or some product wasn't coming in, and everything was disrupted. So remember the toilet paper shortage, right? Like some people were hoarding toilet paper, and then good luck getting your hands on some because nobody was working to make it, you know. And we have to go to back to old-fashioned means there. Um, Improving efficiency at the plants, to reduce cost, speed, etc. And then we have this other problem where there's other countries in the world that are also manufacturing stuff, and they're manufacturing it often much cheaper than we do, because they don't pay people the same way we pay them. They don't give them benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And so, yeah, they can manufacture steel in China and ship it to the US to build cars in the US. It makes no sense. We used to make our own steel. So these are some of the problems in industry. We do have a lot of solutions in industry. And remember I was talking about like the robotic, you know, forklifts and stuff at the Amazon plant. There's some pictures of them right there. We also have now seen a lot of industrial robots going into place because they can work around the clock, folks. Right? They don't have to stop. They're more accurate. They don't get tired. They don't complain. They don't ask for a raise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And another thing that's happening is they use cameras now to check the quality of products through this technology called computer vision. We have a whole course in this, by the way. And it can like spot flaws maybe where humans can't even spot them, right? These are actively used in manufacturing already, even right here in our district, by the way. Some of the additional solutions, so like PPE equipment. So for example, like if we were required to wear safety glasses, a helmet, a mask, an aspirator, or whatever in the job, they might have vision systems on site that like, hey, employee number 52 is not wearing their mask and they should be, that type of thing. Um, Visual inspection of a weld, right? So in other words, um, and this is pretty weird, right? But like welding traditionally was always a manual job, and now that's becoming automated too. But the inspection of the welds is also becoming automated as well. Very interesting. At Gateway, we have a very big welding department, if you guys didn't know that. And one of our more popular programs is welding, also a very high demand career path. And when we train our students how to do welding, they start with virtual welders. So they don't weld with real stuff. They practice with this virtual reality helmet and they hold the wand and everything and they practice their welds before they start moving on to real stuff to save money, you know. Another thing that's happening too is like this inventory system using drones, right? So like if you have inventory way up on a rack in a warehouse, it's probably easier for a drone to go up there and count the inventory rather than you get up on a forklift or climb a ladder or whatever. So lots of little innovations like that, and there's some of the graphics that go with it. All right, skipping the discussion stuff. Energy industry also pretty huge. So this includes like all the fossil fuels and electricity, hydropower, nuclear power, and all the renewables. We've got about 6.7 million people working in that sector. Close to 5% of the workforce works in energy. Some problems that we have, at least in the US, we don't, we're running out of oil. We consume more oil than what we produce, even though, and a lot of people don't realize this, we're one of the largest producers of oil. We just use so darn much of it, and we can't help it, right? So we have to drive everywhere, and homes and factories and stuff are powered by it. We use more and more power. Let's think about this. Do you have less stuff plugged into your walls now than you did 20 years ago? No, we just always seem to get more stuff that consumes power. Um, and they talk about energy security. It's like, well, if we get our power from oil and coal and gas and renewables and nuclear, do we have enough? And here's one of the big problems for AI, right? So Microsoft is building their plants, but they're already running into, or data centers, excuse me, and they're already running into issues here in Wisconsin where they're concerned with, do we have enough energy generating capability to power those data centers because they use so much darn power. So we got to up our production of energy in all areas, really, right? We don't want to increase fossil fuels, but that's probably one of the pathways. And then they were talking, remember this, we said this a couple of weeks ago, that one of the solutions they were thinking of for the data centers was putting nuclear reactors a mile down into the earth. I think that's really weird. I'm not sure I like it, right? They consider it safer. I don't know. It sounds like it might cause an earthquake to me, right? Yeah, they say the unpredictability of weather for renewable energy. So wind power requires wind, solar power requires sun, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you have to use a mix of all of them ultimately to make stuff happen. Some of the solutions, they're letting AI manage our power grid so that if like one grid needs more power, for example, and a lot of people don't know this, but we have power plants in Wisconsin and there's power plants in Illinois and power plants over in Michigan. And when one system is overtaxed, they can draw power from the other systems and pull it over, right? And they can have AI manage that. There's an AI engine called DeepMind that predicts wind and power output 36 hours ahead of crucial actual generation. So in other words, if they like anticipate, oh my God, it's going to get really hot, but thankfully it's also going to be windy. So we'll have enough wind power to kind of compensate for all the ACs turning on, that kind of thing. And we use AI also to help store renewable energy, because a lot of that renewable energy requires storage, right? So you're generating electricity directly. You got to store it in batteries, right? You got to push it out to the grid. All right, in transportation, also a lot of stuff going on here. All right, so we're generally referring to moving things around, people, goods, includes all the major forms: air, rail, marine, truck, transit, ground, etc. We have about 5.6 million people working in this industry and in warehousing. So they're probably counting like truckers and the warehouses and all that kind of stuff. And it's 1 point something trillion to the GDP in 2016, which is quite a while ago. So you can imagine that's increased significantly since then. I wouldn't be surprised if it would have doubled. That's kind of a weird stat, kind of an old one. Some of the problems they have is, keeping things safe. So like, unfortunately in transportation, people die, right? Because things can collide or derail or sink or explode or get hijacked or whatever, right? We just saw that the plane helicopter crash thing happen. And then you just take like the drunken driving factor. It always floors me when you drive down the highway and they have those signs and it says like, hey, this many deaths in Wisconsin in the last year on the highways. And it's like, oh, wow, that's a lot, you know? And so you should always be super, super careful when you're driving. The one thing that I always say to people is like, I think a lot of people, they're driving and they're on their phones at the same time. It's really scary stuff. And I see it all the time. So shortage of skilled drivers. This one might astound you. It's like, how hard is it to drive? Well, here's what's happening. I have 2 adult children. Neither one of them has a driver's license. Conversely, my generation, the day I turned 16, I was at the DMV taking my road test. And 1 week later, I was in a car accident. But that's a separate story, right? But yeah, I like to drive, and there's not a lot of people that can drive. And if you're driving a truck or a train or a plane or whatever, I mean, you got to get trained for that stuff, right? So I'm just putting it out there. That's a job too, truck driving, Uber driving. Reducing the transportation cost, especially the fuel cost, is a big thing. We are very fortunate here, though. I had a friend visiting from England this past summer, and he rented a car, and he goes, I can't believe how cheap your fuel is here. Oh my God, we pay like 5 times the price in England, doing the conversion from liters to gallons and stuff. Another problem with transportation is congestion. Um, I'll kind of throw in this like little commentary here. Like, we're seeing all these bike lanes added to the roads now, and they're putting like cement curbs. Like in Milwaukee, it's happening a lot. And all of a sudden, it's like, what happens if an ambulance needs to come through? Nobody can move over. Yeah. So they're anticipating less driving in the future, but I'm not really sure about that. I know I've told you guys the story already, but a number of years ago, pre-pandemic, we had a contingency of people that went out to the Tesla plant in Reno, Nevada. This is part of a technical college conference, by the way. And I got to ride in one of the self-driving cars at Tesla, and I was completely blown away. Right? So this is already happening. There are some states where AI can drive cars legally on the road. Right? Wisconsin's not one of them. They're already using AI to predict traffic jams, flying drone taxis. I don't know if I'd ever want to get in one of those, but they're coming, right? Google Maps and Waze. Okay, so here's kind of an interesting thing. It's like sometimes I drive places and I know how to get there. I don't need the GPS, right? I know exactly how to get there, but sometimes I GPS it anyways, because if there's traffic, it'll reroute me. Or more importantly, like when I was driving back from Chicago about 2 weeks ago, I went to a show there. We were coming back late at night, and I was driving home, and the GPS was telling me there's a police car up ahead. There's a traffic situation up ahead. So it's kind of giving you a heads up. This is a weird technology. Didi is a technology that uses facial recognition. So you're driving down the road, and there's a camera that's fast enough to take a picture of your face and go, oh my God, that person's falling asleep. Right. I'm not sure how it stops that person from driving, but perhaps, it's app driven or something like that. Um, we have wired bikes, and we have also Neuro, which creates a grocery delivery robot. I have not seen either one of those technologies, but I have heard about both of them. But all that stuff is coming, folks. All right, now let's look at education. Hey, welcome to our world, right? So that consists of public, private, and home schools. 3.7 million teachers, both public and private schools. I don't know if the technical college, I assume they include colleges, uh, but yeah, there's a lot of people that work in education as well. The national average student to teacher ratio in public school is 16 to 1. So 16 students to one teacher. That's not true in all school districts, that's for sure. Some of the problems schools are having is some schools are overcrowded, which is kind of weird because we're also told in education that there's an enrollment cliff coming. So when they had the economic crash in 2008, right? So we call it the Great Recession, I think they called it back then. A lot of young couples decided they weren't going to have children or stopped having children. And the population growth declined. And if you do your math on that, those children from there on forward are just going through our schools and just about to reach higher education. So in higher ed, they're telling us that we're reaching what we call the enrollment cliff that's going to start in 2026 or 27, which means we're going to see a sharp decline in the number of people coming out of high school, coming into colleges, and therefore also going into the workforce. I think it's a really interesting problem. That's not indicated here, but that's something that we're told about statistically is happening. The teachers that I know that work in the K through 12 system, my sister is one of them, have often or very much seen, like in some schools where they used to have, let's say, 2 second grade classrooms, now they only have 1, right? Because they don't have enough students for 2 classrooms and 2 teachers, that kind of thing. The way schools are spending money, and Wisconsin's very guilty of this with the whole Act 10 thing, is, and this is kind of weird to admit here in a session like this, but people in my role here at Gateway, instructors, have not had a pay raise in over 15 years. Cost of living increase, but not a pay raise. Yeah, think about that for a second. So school spending is stagnant and often being cut back. Act 10 is being fought right now, so maybe we'll get a pay raise someday. We'll see. The way that teachers are trained and the method that they use is outdated. And real frankly, there's a lot of teachers that, probably shouldn't be doing what they're doing anymore. They're not really kind of keeping up with the times. I think thankfully I sort of am, despite my age. A lot of people freak out for safety and security in schools. I mean, how far do we go? Like a couple weeks in time before there's like another school shooting. I mean, it's crazy. There's one that almost happened in Kenosha. I don't know if you guys even heard about it. Back in November, I think November 17th or something around there. Somebody came into our Kenosha campus with weapons. Fortunately, they were stopped. The campus was locked down. They captured them. Nothing happened, but it almost happened here. We could have been a headline, right? And how horrible that would have been. Help for students with disabilities. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that there's more and more people that are like are learning disabled, on the spectrum, have mental health issues, have regular health issues, or are disabled somehow, don't know the language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We say we have problems with Common Core curriculum, and okay, the mental health thing is a big thing. Right now, there's a little bit of a mental health crisis happening with just the change of the presidential administration, believe it or not. And we have notifications internally about it that our counselors are seeing a higher rate of students coming to them, et cetera. So this is a really big issue. Some of the AI solution. So George Washington University has a chatbot called Martha that answers students' questions. Very interesting when you guys like sign into the Gateway website and a little chat bot thing comes up in the corner. It's not a chat bot, by the way. There's actually real people on the other end of that screen that are human beings, believe it or not. They also have this tool called Jill Watson, which is a teaching assistant at GIT, which I think is kind of interesting. I've read about that one. I've never seen it in action. And then we also have Alex, which is kind of this tool that we also see here at Gateway, depending on what courses and stuff you're taking. But it's a research tool. Of course, I think a lot of us right now, for example, even when we're typing an email, you notice like our Gmail helps us correct our spelling and our grammar. Is that AI? How many of us now are actively using Chat GPT or Copilot or Gemini or one of those tools to help us do our research? And I'm even allowing it in this class now, but I do ask that if you use Gen AI, right, to do your research, that you ask it for its sources so you can look at the original source material and that you can cite it. And I do ask that you do that. And I think it's okay to use AI to help you in those capacities. In the banking industry, um, you know, they deal with obviously with money issues. You know, there's retail, commercial banking, investment banking, almost 2 million employees in that field in the US. Um, really good sector to work in. There's usually a lot of like growth possibilities in those areas. Um, they do have problems though. Um, there's a lot of banks that are forming overseas or online banks that don't have a physical presence that are starting to challenge traditional banks. Um, we also have, for example, um, I bank with Educators Credit Union, and a lot of people in our area do that as well. And I'm going to say, God, I don't know how many years ago it was. But once again, I was traveling in New York City, and it must have been almost 20 years ago, roughly, right? And we were looking for an ATM, and I noticed like a Chase Bank, and I walk up and I'm like, this is a Chase Bank. It's like a little kiosk, and they had like those automated tellers. Like they didn't have like an office you walked into. They just had the video screens. Like I never had seen them before, and you didn't like go in and talk to a person. Well, I guess that's great if you can't hold the person up and ask them for money, right? And in fact, if you do, they probably lock you in a little lobby there. But the point was that type of banking was coming, and now it's here. Like when I go into my local branch of Educators Credit Union, they do have people there, but the traditional teller services go to a video kiosk, both outside and inside. I think it's really strange. A lot of regulations on this industry, and there should be, right? The customers expect a lot. Um, and you know what? There are still security breaches. So people either hack your account or they get your debit card info or whatever. So you want a good institution to protect you on that. And customers are very quick to jump ship if they're not happy with their institution, by the way. Bank of America uses a chat bot called Erica, and it does a lot of automated stuff. So like for example, you say they have 500,000 question variants programmed into it, and that can handle most customer questions, right? And some of the chatbots, and Erica is one of them that is really, really powerful and can dynamically adjust, like you almost think you're talking to a human and getting responses. It just shows how well trained it is, really. They have this other thing called Acrylus. I hope I'm saying that correctly. That and helps organizations. They say make better lending decisions, which to me says deny people loans. That's how I see it. So you can read into that too. But they can look at it'll detect fraudulent documents. So some people like send in like fake paychecks and they like Photoshop them, and the AI can see it. They can see the little traces of the documents. They also have the Zest Finance thing. Um, Once again, I think to deny people loans, kind of like insurance companies use AI to deny people coverage. All right. So we're going to shift the focus now over to generative AI and talk about how this is used in all these different industries. Remember, the difference with generative AI is generative AI has the capability of creating content from nothing, or really, from how it's trained. It is starting to be used in all the different sectors. It's kind of the point of that. So here's what's happening in retail. Um, you go into an online store, you have a history of always buying certain types of products. It recognizes what your patterns are, makes some determinations, and it helps you in selecting products. So it's only going to show you, not only going to show you, but it shows you stuff that you might be more interested in first. These are very clever algorithms. There are some places now that have basically virtual try-ons. Like, for example, like what would I look out like in that outfit? And it'll actually like paint the outfit on you, like a virtual version of you. And I know some people have already shopped like this, so you know what I'm talking about. And also like just the targeted advertising alone. I don't know if you guys are really in tune to this, but like I noticed it on Facebook. I'm not super huge on the platform, but when I do log in, like if I'm talking a lot about AI stuff here tonight, I'll go into Facebook and I'll have ads about AI, or maybe all the different, maybe I'll have ads about agriculture, GIS drones. I'm not really sure, but I think it's pretty interesting when, you know, um, companies like that, and Facebook has their own AI engine, by the way, that drives a lot of how stuff is delivered to your screen. One of the reasons I don't like the platform, actually, and just kind of ramping up on that a little bit. Like if you use some of their apps, if you load the app on your phone or the Messenger app on your phone, it listens to you when you're talking. And then you go into Facebook and you're like, oh my God, I was just talking about that. Have you ever had that happen? And you're expressly allowing this, folks, by installing the app on your phone. So in agriculture, we're starting to see optimized crop yields, um, different pest management strategies, and precision farming techniques that allow you to allocate your resources a little bit better. Um, Medical image analysis is doing this too. So this is kind of interesting. I know my wife went for a scan, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I forget what they were scanning, one of her internal organs. I think her pancreas, or yeah, I think it was her pancreas. And the scanning software threw a flag up saying to check something, right? And it can't make a diagnosis, but it sure made the doctor look at it really close, you know. Um, there's also like these simulations, right? And simulations are a big part of this too. Um, Surgical simulations that hopefully train people better to do, better stuff in reality. Also to optimize care plans. I think that's kind of interesting. Um, in manufacturing, we're starting to see AI used to optimize designs. And I like this word optimized a lot because it's one of the terms that we use in operations science, right? Like you have like a certain scenario and you're trying to optimize it. And that doesn't necessarily mean make more money. It might be like create a better, stronger product or a longer lasting product or whatever. Um, but we're seeing Gen AI used to develop new, better things. Um, Quality control processes are improved and predictive maintenance techniques reduce downtime. Now, this is one thing that we actually try to do at Gateway with our robotics lab. So once again, in the data classroom, room 110 at IMET, which is out on Highway H and 20, right, just south of the movie theaters there under the Sturtevant Water Tower, we have a big robotic setup there. And then the sim lab, which is right next door to the data classroom, has all those visualization screens. And we run algorithms on those that feed or grab data from the robots that it's being fed, and robots will send data like maybe one of the solenoids is failing or something like that, and that will throw up an alert on the system so that we can shut that machine down and fix it before it completely breaks and it gets really expensive to fix. It's cheaper to fix one little part than it is to fix a bigger part. And that's all done kind of automatically. This is stuff that's already in use. In the energy industry, like looking at how we both generate and distribute power more efficiently. Another thing, and we talked about this, I think, last week too, like, for example, the Northwestern Mutual Tower in downtown Milwaukee. When they built it, they were able to build it with all this super high tech stuff. Like, for example, the one example I gave is um, they can, with an literally an app or on-site computer system, turn on all the lights in the whole building all at once. Like, wow, that's just the lights. They can also do things like, okay, well, if this floor is not being used today, let's turn the heat down, or let's turn the lights off, or let's reroute the hot water to the floor where people are actually using it, that type of stuff. And some of that stuff is becoming automated and controlled by AI systems, right? In transportation, we use the data already to do real-time predictions and how we do logistics. Logistics, for example, for moving product around the planet, like on boats and planes and trains and stuff like that, and trucks, is much more complicated than people can even imagine. The fact that we're getting to the point where we're having autonomous vehicles um, delivering products, I think this is a little bit weird, but it is happening. I see it happening first more for long haul stuff. So you can imagine like being out on the highway and passing like a double or triple trailer truck that doesn't have a driver. That's kind of weird, but it's just driving down the road and it's going from point A to point B, and then we drivers take it, to take it into the warehouse. But by managing how stuff moves around, you can really find a lot of operational efficiencies. A lot of this industry is already very heavily datafied, by the way, to a really crazy degree. Um, so, for example, I think in the MIS class we watched a video about this, where there's people that are companies that, like, for example, take container ships and they fill them up with containers from like the Orient with product, and then the boats come over here and all those containers have to go to the right places. Some of those containers contain food products that are refrigerated or need to be temperature controlled or whatever. Um, and those are all datafied. They have like computers on board that monitor the temperatures. Those are tied into a network. The networks are tied into a satellite. The satellites feed back to the home office, and the home office propagates that out to the customers. So, like if I'm shipping, like let's say a container full of cheese, I can monitor that in real time while it's out there, and AI can step in and adjust the temperature if the temperature is dropping or going up, or all those weird things. In education, all right, I don't know, like, they're probably put me out of business here. They can probably program a chat bot to do what I'm doing right now, like read the PowerPoint slides to you and hopefully have a little conversation about it. But adaptive learning experiences that cater to the individual student's needs. So this is really kind of an interesting thing. A talented teacher, I think, can kind of do this dynamically. So I can recognize, like, for example, in coding classes, which I mostly teach, that some people are tapped in and get it, and some people need a little help, and some people need a lot of help. And then adapting to all of those scenarios, but still trying to get people from point A to point B in the process. There are virtual tutoring services out there. I don't know if Gateway was affiliated with those. Anybody tried any of those? I forget what it's called. I guess not. Okay. We also have, like, simulations and interactive learning environments that dynamically adapt. We're starting to get this on some of our training that we do as instructors, and I think that what eventually will happen is we'll see more and more of that type of thing happening in the classroom. I know in the medical areas we have like simulated patients that we use, right? And that's not really quite AI. But it's better to work with a simulated environment. For example, like if you're learning to be a pilot, it's better to train in a flight simulator before you get in the plane and crash it, that type of thing. So in banking, there's more and more of these attempts at fraud, but also more and more attempts at blocking fraud from happening. Um, the This is kind of a weird little story. I once went to a gas pump, bought some gas. This is out in like New Berlin or somewhere like that, and um, plenty of money in my account. Swiped at the pump, got my gas, went to the next place to buy something or other, went to use my card. And I'm like, what do you mean? I got tons of money. My card was locked out and it wouldn't work. And what had happened is my credit union, after I went to the gas pump, somebody had a scanner on the swipe machine or whatever. I forget, the skimmer, I think is what they call them. And by the time I drove from the gas station to the next store, which is like 10 minutes, there were like 70 or 80 micro transactions off of my account, like 25 cents, $1, 20 cents, like that. And after a bunch of them, the bank's like, this is very abnormal. And they shut my account down. I had to go get a new card and all that. But that was automatically detected by their software. So because can you imagine if that just kept going on, my account would be empty after a while. And who are you going to go after? It's like probably 1,000 microtransactions. Like, who are you going to go after? Yeah, very, very weird. A lot of real-time financial data analysis happening right now. So people look at data that's happening in the markets in particular. One use of AI is a lot of people are trying to use AI to do market predictions and leverage the market, which is kind of scary in and of itself because that's a highly speculative game. All right. There are a few case studies, and what I'm going to tell you here is we're not going to do these here in class. We have about 10 minutes left, but I do want to kind of put it on your radar because NVIDIA has been in the news a lot lately, partially because of this DeepSeek story that we were talking about earlier, but also because NVIDIA right now is putting out a brand new series of graphics processors uh, that are in super, super high demand because graphic processors run faster than most CPUs do and therefore are highly desirable for running generative AI and AI driven tasks. NVIDIA, of course, has a Wisconsin connection. The person who is the CEO and founder of the company was a student at MSOE in Milwaukee and funds a lot of the programs and stuff there, by the way. So we have that little connection. But NVIDIA, the reason they're in this discussion basically is because their GPUs, graphic processing units, are so powerful that they're very, very high in demand as the primary form of processor for AI work. One thing that's really fascinating that I saw in relation to the DeepSeek story is that NVIDIA's new 5070 or whatever they call it processor, they're starting to build computers around those chips instead of just using them for graphics and personal computers. They're building full computer systems. They're very, very expensive, but they can be used to do a lot of localized AI propagation. And I think this is the thing we're going to start to see grow as well. So we're going to see this like special type of computer that's built just to do AI. And right now it's a little cost prohibitive because most people don't have $3, $4, $5,000 laying around to buy one. But when the Apple computer first came out, that's about how much it cost. It took about a decade before people could really afford them, but now everybody's got them, right? So this is going to be a thing. So what might happen is we might have our own computers in our homes that do our own AI. So we might have our own AI in our house. Is that kind of weird? Yeah, it's kind of weird, but that's kind of where we're kind of leading with this stuff. This is really related more to manufacturing. It's a very interesting case study. But if you've ever been in a factory that kind of looks like this kind of operation, it's a combination of robots and humans working with all these technologies. Very, very powerful. I think probably, and this is probably the most important part of it is this dynamic simulations. One thing that we have mimicked in our sim lab next door to the data classroom is what we call a digital twin, right? So this is another one of these AI terms. So this is where we take a realistic manufacturing environment and completely replicate it in a digital space. So every piece of equipment, every process, every action is simulated, and therefore you can build products, work out all the bugs on the build before you try it with real equipment or break equipment, right? And a lot of those digital simulations are there. In healthcare, we're starting to use, and I swear sometimes doctors do this, right? Did you ever go to the doctor's office and you ask them a question and then, well, there's some possibilities here. You know what? Give me a few minutes and then they run off to the other room and they Google the answer and then come back to you because they don't even know the answer, right? And now what's going to happen is they're going to start, so I think it's kind of the dumbing down of doctors, sort of in a way. It's because how can doctors keep up with all the developments that are happening? It's a full-time job, right? It's a full-time job to be a doctor, but also a full-time job to keep up with all the new knowledge. And so I think what you're going to see happen is Gen AI is going to step into healthcare to help make sure people don't make mistakes in like the medicines they're giving or the diagnoses they're making or what metrics on tests actually mean. I think it's already happening, but I think it's going to happen more and more. I think, and this is my opinion, mind you, clever doctors are already using these tools, right? You know, um, and how can somebody think about this as a human being remember all the possibilities? They can't, right? So that's why I think this is kind of interesting. So go ahead and follow that link and read up on that. I think it's pretty interesting. Gen AI is also coming to the energy sector. Is in kind of really weird ways, I think, is we prefer to use clean renewable energy, but sometimes that's not the most effective thing. Like, for example, solar is not great on a cloudy day or in climates like Wisconsin where it's cloudy most of the time. But doesn't mean that we shouldn't have it, right? That we can leverage it to our advantage. All right. So this is kind of the closing section of this, and it's all going to fit within the 2 hours, ironically. Some of the challenges in using Gen AI in different industry. We need a lot of data for generative AI. I think we talked about this last week when we use the public facing AI engines. They actually typically only have data that is publicly searchable on the internet as their pool, right? And that's by design. If you get into the paid versions of generative AI, it will have deeper, richer data sets, but you got to pay for them, right? But from what I hear, they're significantly more effective. I do not pay into any of my AIs, but Noah, who's not here tonight, does, and he's like a huge proponent of it. There's a lot of ethical and legal concerns here, and there should be. Chris, you have your hand up,
Yeah, I have a quick question if you don't mind if I chime in here quick.
please.
Because this is something that's really confusing to me about these models. What exactly is training data? So because like when they first got launched, it didn't seem like they were just searching things off of the internet. And it was like actually just sort of like they describe how it's like just statistically predicting what should come next. But now they're clearly on the internet, but it still like seems like they're like the big companies are like battling over training data. What exactly is it like on a nuts and bolts level?
All right. Well, think about it like this. If I'm Microsoft and I have my AI engine called Copilot, right? And what Copilot originally started as was a service on a coding repository platform called GitHub. And some of you might know what that is and some might not. But GitHub is a site where you can go store your program code and allow other programmers to see it or work on it with you and share it with the world or whatever you choose to do with it or distribute your software that way as well. Microsoft bought out Copilot a number of years ago, and therefore, because the service for most people that use it is free, they also explicitly give Microsoft access to all of their code that they write. Right. Some of this is professional code too. And so that becomes part of their AI engines, uh, code, generative AI code producing aspect of Copilot. And that's where Copilot started, by the way. And when it came out, people were like, "Oh my God!" I was on GitHub and I was like trying to solve a problem, and Copilot was like, "Oh my God! It wrote my code for me. It was amazing," that kind of thing. And the reason it worked so well is because it had access to all of that code base. So that's kind of an example, Chris, of where some of the data comes from. In other cases, we have companies like Facebook, for example, that has its own AI project built into their metaverse, whatever they call it now. Instagram, Facebook, all their products. And they use all the information that they gather up from people's social media accounts to build a data set and to build profiles about people and how people behave and what people post and what people think and what political affiliations they have, et cetera, et cetera. And so when they're doing generative AI to dish out ads to their platform, they base it upon some intelligence from their own AI engine. So, I mean, that's kind of part of it, right? Otherwise, what's happening is people are starting to conglomerate data, because they realize that AI is data hungry, and then they're feeding it into the AI. Right? So I hope that sort of answers the question. But one of the aspects of like really building a powerful generative AI is, you know, you design its algorithms and put in all of its, machine learning components and AI vision and all that kind of stuff. And then you have to go through the process of training it. Training it is a combination of running the algorithms over very large data sets and feeding it as much data as you possibly can. Sometimes it's synthetic, but sometimes it's real. And that's why data has value. And so, yeah, I think for sure. One of, I'm just going to mention this here, pause the video. With this next one, the ethical and legal considerations, very interestingly, I went to a conference about AI at Northwestern Mutual, of all places. And there was a collection of southeastern Wisconsin educators that are delving into this area. One of the people that was there was one of my former deans from the Art Institute, who herself is a prolific visual artist, aside from being an educator. And she had this conversation with me, which I thought was interesting. We started talking about intellectual property rights and how generative AI creates artwork, music, whatever, by scanning the internet for often what artists put out there for free, and then use that as the basis to create its own work. And so she's developed this philosophy now that whenever she creates new artwork, she does not ever put it online. And if she puts it in a gallery, she prohibits people from taking images and posting it, right? Because then it becomes fodder for the AI to generate more. And then how does she make money off of what she created if the AI is using that as a basis to create its own? Right? So I see that concern. So there's a lot of potential for misuse there. I think I did mention to you guys like Spotify, for example. A lot of the music you hear on Spotify is generated by Spotify's AI. Weird, very, very weird. Some of the other challenges are that we need a lot of computing power, folks. Hardware, software, energy creation, and we're already seeing that that's a roadblock. Just generating enough power is a roadblock. Creating the computer chips and the cutting edge processors also a roadblock. It's, that those new NVIDIA GPUs, try getting your hands on one. I think people are already like camped out in tents waiting to buy them, right? Or were, right? And now I think the waiting list is already a couple of months to get your hands on one. There's a lot of bias and fairness concerns, right? Because when we feed data into a system, if the data strongly leans one way or the other, it's also going to train the models to lean the same way that humans come up with biases. It's based on the information or misinformation that we're fed that can be built into AI models. So that's a deep concern as well. that actually some of those biases could be worse with AI than they are with humans. Right. Generative AI models produce outputs that can be complex and difficult to interpret. Very much so, right? Um, you can follow pathways on this. Actually, so people do like entire like TED Talks on this, that they have AIs create logical problems that only AIs can solve, and they go through like the whole build of it, and then humans read it and go, I don't know what this is talking about. And I think we're going to get to an era where AI might come up with solutions to problems that we have, and we won't be able to understand the solution or implement it because it's way over our capability to cognitively decipher it and put it into practical use. And that to me is like, okay, so we're programming it to create stuff that we can't even understand. This is like science fiction stuff, right? But that's a possibility. Integration with existing systems and workflows. Okay, well, it doesn't really say much there in that bullet point, but it's like how do we take AI? Like, for example, how do I take AI and take the work out of what I'm doing right now? Maybe I should develop an, you know, maybe I can have ChatGPT create an algorithm to do all my lecturing for me so that, and then maybe I can train the AI to also grade all your homework. And maybe we can train the AI to just take my job. I won't even need a pay raise. How about that? Right? And these are the kind of fears. I mean, they're very, very logical fears. All right. So this is what we have here. They have a couple of little questions here at the end, and you can kind of feel free to think about these questions. But I do have the homework questions that kind of relate to what we were talking about here today. I do want to encourage you to use Gen AI to do research on those homework questions and to think about the topics. I think some of these questions are very, very valid, and I wish we had time to sit here and hash through them, but it is getting late at night, and I think we are all done. So that's kind of the wrap up here. So this video will conclude here.